time for Voice of Indie. Your hosts today are Beem Weeks, author, producer, and marketing monster for independent multimedia publisher Fresh Ink Group, and Stephen Gies, author, producer, composer, and publisher for Fresh Ink Group.
And hello, everybody. Welcome to the Voice of Indie podcast show, episode number 49, one away from that magical 50 mark. I'm your host, Beem Weeks, and with me is my co-host, Stephen Gies. Good afternoon, Stephen. How you doing?
Oh, I'm just thrilled to be here. I've been having a fun week. Lauren's on vacation this week, and I've been trying to do her job and appreciating her day and night. I've been getting aggravated because everything seems to be slowing down. We can't even seem to get a book up on Kindle in less than 5 or 6 days right now. And like we published Karen Ingles' book over a week ago, and we're still trying to get proofs approved so we can place a book order for her event. We published Robert G. Williscroft's latest book about a week ago, and we're still trying to get the problem solved with that. And instead of being able to just keep calling Lauren and saying, hey, fix this, I've been trying to do it myself, and I'm getting a little bit aggravated here. But other than that, I'm having a good time. How about you?
I'm having a fantastic time, doing a lot of Fresh Ink Group work, too. But and it's stuff that I've just learned. So this whole indexing thing, that's tedious work, and it's time-consuming. But you know what? It's kind of cool. It's another arrow in the quiver of learning the behind-the-scenes stuff in publishing. But, hey, that's what we do.
Yeah, we're getting David Carroll, newscaster David Carroll's new book, Hello Chattanooga, ready. And it's 630 pages about every famous person who ever visited or performed in Chattanooga. And we're doing an index for it, which what Beem is talking about, because he's going and putting in the coding for that index. And it turns out that in 630 pages, the only thing that's not getting indexed is the word "the" in about three different places, because it's just pages and pages of lists of names and auditoriums and things like that, and it's all getting indexed. And every one of those is taking a minimum of 5 keystrokes in order to put the codes in there to tell it how to index, and it's become quite daunting, hasn't it, Beem?
Yes, it has. Yes, it is. But you said, he's mentioning everybody that's played in Chattanooga, and boy, you're not lying. I mean, it's everybody going back to the 19 teens.
Yep.
When they first opened their big auditorium there, it's basketball games, it's boxing matches, it's vaudevillians, it's movie stars that show up to do war bond drives. It's politicians coming to do the stump there and give speeches. Yeah, concerts. The whole right now I'm at the English invasion, the British invasion. So you get all the Beatles and the Stones and people who came through there. And I haven't seen the Stones, but the Beatles they actually didn't go through there. They played elsewhere, but they did a closed circuit live broadcast in the auditorium there. So it's really interesting, but it's, like I said, it's tedious and it takes a lot of work.
I just got an email from Lauren giving me some advice on one of the problems that I've been trying to solve today. Oh, yes, we're having a good time. But we do have some good news. My 3 Wishes by Kanoi K is now released as of today, and all of the editions are available at all of the retailers worldwide. It only took several weeks to get all of those problems solved, but congratulations, Kanoi, your book is out there. All of you, we appreciate the pre-orders that you put in, and your e-books should have been delivered by now, and your print books should be going out today or tomorrow. So everybody, look for My 3 Wishes by Kanoi K. She was the Polynesian review performer who traveled the world with her family and then wrote a fascinating memoir full of pictures. That's My 3 Wishes. Get on over there and get your order in if you don't have one already.
Get you a copy. And speaking of new releases, Robert G. Williscroft's Operation Arctic Sting, a Mac McDowell mission is populating this week. And we've got him on tonight. So we'll talk a little bit about promotion and stuff as well. So get over there and get your copy.
Yeah, if you can. Not all of the editions are showing up yet, and that's one of the things that I've been working on today.
If it's not there when you first go to it, give it a day and go back and check, and keep checking back periodically, and it'll eventually line up in there.
Now, another one that I mentioned is Karen Ingalls' new book, Learning About Autism. It is also populating this week. We published that one even before Robert Williscroft. And her book, his book, we've got a paperback showing up at some of the retailers, but saying unavailable, which again is a Lauren problem that I can't wait till she can try to address. But with Karen Ingalls, we're not even that far. I have not seen any proofs for her book yet, and we're down to 9 days left before her big launch event, where she needs 3 boxes of books there in the room with her during the big event. And I can't place an order because I haven't approved proofs yet. So Learning About Autism is appearing out there in a few places in the ebook form, but the print books so far seem to be stalled. And that's one of the things that I'm sitting here monitoring my emails for, because I actually called the vice president at Ingram, who I know personally, and tried to get him to light a fire under him, and he did. So I'm watching for some responses on that. But that's another book that should be populating throughout this week, called Learning About Autism. And that one's it's a little bit of a biographical thing, because it's the story about a woman who's a friend of Karen Ingalls, who adopted 2 boys who had very pronounced special needs, including Justin, who is autistic. And it's all about what her mother learned about raising children with these and trying to take advantage of whatever resources are, or unfortunately not, available in the community. She wound up co-founding a school for autistic children. So this is a fascinating book that's both the story of a family and ways that they learned how to find happiness, but it's also a tremendous resource for people who want to learn about helping children with these kinds of special needs, where to find the resources in the community, and how to be proactive about doing that. That's Learning About Autism. And if you go looking for it and you don't find it, please be a little bit patient. We're trying to resolve some problems with that as well.
All right. And last week we had a giveaway we gave away a signed hardcover copy of My Strange Highway short story collection. And the winner of that is Bernard Fong. So, Bernard, congratulations on that. We will get you that signed copy.
Now, this week's book giveaway, I have multiple copies of the first Daedalus book by Robert G. Williscroft sitting here on the shelf. And Mr. Williscroft has decided to run a promotion and give away the ebook free. And when we get to talking about his Daedalus series, we'll ask him more details about the promotion. But since he's giving away that first book free, I figured these 6 copies I have on the shelf here in the print edition, I might as well give those away too. So we're going to be looking for comments on the YouTube videos, or paying attention to who tweets during today's show or after the show, as well as who calls in tonight, to see if we can give away some of those books as well.
Yeah, and now, listeners, if you're listening to this show, you're a reader. This is the crowd we attract: writers and readers, and the good writers are readers. So If you're a reader, when you read an author's book, especially an indie author, please leave a review. These reviews are important. They're not just to stoke the writer's ego. It lets other readers know, because when I'm on Amazon and I'm looking at some of these indie books, I go to Twitter, I'll follow a link. Some other indie author has a book that sounds interesting. I'll go there and I'll read the reviews and see what people have to say about it. If the majority of those reviews are positive, I tend to grab a copy of that book. If they're, mediocre, I'll still grab a copy of it if the story sounds interesting. So this is vital to all indie authors. And it doesn't matter if you've never heard of them or if they're already popular and other people are leaving the reviews. If you've read the book, the second step is to go and leave a review. This alerts readers, retailers. They'll do certain things with it if there's a lot of reviews. They'll promote it. They'll pump it up. So this really helps all writers out, and it helps other readers as well. So be a good one and leave a review.
Yeah, definitely. You probably, those of you who are in particular Barnes & Noble or Amazon shoppers, you probably noticed that those retailers will recommend books to you that they think that you're interested in. And those usually are based on the books that you have previously purchased or books that they've at least seen you browse. Because a lot of them are noticing, every time you scratch your nose, they've got a record of it and an algorithm that analyzes that. And they're not going to recommend your book or your favorite writer's book to somebody unless there are some high rankings in the reviews. It doesn't have to be a lot of reviews, but they need to be 4 or 5 star reviews to get those retailers to recommend them. So you're also helping encourage your favorite retailer to offer your favorite writer's books to other readers who might be interested in them. That's very important. Now, I've had people tell me before that, hey, I would leave more reviews, but I really don't know what to say. Now, I have a bachelor's degree in literature, so you can give me a 1-page story and I can write a 30-page paper about it. That's something that you learn to do when you do that kind of a degree. But I wouldn't write a review like that. That's not what they're looking for on those. Those kinds of reviews at those retailers are basically just if somebody else is interested enough to look at that book and then scrolls down to see what the other readers have had to say about it, just think to yourself, what would you say to your friend who said, hey, would I like that book? And then say yes. Throw 4 or 5 stars on there. Obviously, we're only looking for honest reviews. And then say why you think other people would enjoy that book. And if you can break it down and, analyze some certain things and say, well, I like it because of this or it compares to that or whatever, that kind of stuff is great. But you don't have to go that far. You can just go as far as saying, this is another great book by one of my favorite writers, 5 stars. Or, it can just be that, this is the 3rd book in the series. I thought the first 2 were just a little bit slow, but still really good. This one really picked up the pace. I like this one the best of all. 5 stars. Those kinds of things. A sentence or 2. Just what would help encourage somebody else to see that and say, okay, I think it's worth giving it a try. It's not that hard to do. So please get out there and do it because these really help your independent authors a lot. Now, we've got a roll-in to tell you how to talk to us during today's show.
Call 516-453-9902 right now with your questions or comments for tonight's guest. Or post a note on Twitter with hashtag Fresh Ink Group in the body of the tweet and we'll read it on air. That's 516-453-9902 or hashtag Fresh Ink Group on Twitter.
Be there. All right. Dr. Williscroft is a retired submarine officer, deep sea and saturation diver, scientist, author of numerous books and hundreds of articles, and a lifelong adventurer. He spent 22 months underwater, a year in the equatorial Pacific, 3 years in the Arctic ice pack, and a year at the geographic South Pole. He holds degrees in marine physics and meteorology, and a doctorate for developing a system to protect scuba divers in the contaminated water. Dr. Williscroft's decorated service includes 23 years in the U.S. Navy and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, directing diving operations throughout the Pacific and the Atlantic. Besides penning novels and nonfiction books, he also writes extensively in other forums, including articles on terrorism-related topics. Since becoming a Fresh Ink Group member author, he has launched 2 series and is planning more exciting projects. Robert G. Williscroft lives in Centennial, Colorado with his family. And with that, welcome to the show, Dr. Williscroft.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Hey, Robert. Good to talk to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we don't already talk almost every day.
Now, what I just read there in your bio, it's an extensive resume. how has these experiences been incorporated into your writing?
Well, I don't think we have 4 or 5 hours to talk about it. However, my Mac McDowell series actually starts with Operation Ivy Bells, and I participated in Operation Ivy Bells. I led a saturation diving team into the Soviet waters, and we locked out of the submarine and tapped into underwater communications cables. So that certainly gave me hands-on experience to write about it. And the second book in the series, Operation Icebreaker, is about laying acoustic arrays underneath the Arctic ice pack, again using saturation diving, and I have spent a great deal of time on submarines, under the ice, and above on the ice doing research, so I know the area well, I know the critters well, and I have a pretty good handle on the people who work up there. The third book, which is somewhere between not published and published, Operation Arctic Sting, picks up where Operation Icebreaker leaves off, and the team of saturation divers and several other people actually managed to take over a Soviet highly automated nuclear submarine, and they move it under the ice pack to the U.S. East Coast so that our people can get into it and take it apart and figure out what makes it work, dogged the entire time by Soviet submarines who would really like their sub back, and if they can't get it back, probably want to sink it. When we talk about hard science fiction, my background, my interest has been science fiction for several decades, more decades than I really like to think about. I have studied astronomy formally, studied physics, and in particular astrophysics formally. And of course, I'm very familiar with the water, with the ocean, and what goes on there. And so I'm able to take these things and put them together in ways that not very many people can, where I'm actually applying my own experience and my own education and the things I know and think about, put the stories together.
Now, all of our commercials that we're going to roll during the show today are for Robert G. Williscroft books. So why don't we start with the first one, Beem, and let's hear the Star Child trilogy.
All right.
Now, the Star Child trilogy by Robert G. Williscroft is complete. In Book 1, Slingshot, 3 scientist engineers reach for the stars as they blend their skills with a host of skilled colleagues to create the world's first space launch loop. A team of young eco-terrorists will go to any length to halt the project. One woman is determined to scoop the story, reporting events to a watching world. Slingshot ranges from Seattle's financial district to the ocean bottom off Baker Island to the edge of space and across the vast panorama of an equatorial Pacific. It's a love story, a gender bender, and a mystery about a missing aviatrix, a conspiracy, and a true believer. It's about high finance, intrigue, heroism, fanaticism, betrayal, and humanity's surge into outer space. In Book 2, The Star Child Compact, an international team ventures to Saturn's moon Iapetus to verify it really is a derelict starship. They discover the founders, descendants of the starship's builders, who arrived in our solar system 150,000 years ago. Together with the founders, the explorers advance founder science with momentous implications for the entire solar system, paving the way for a joint push to the distant reaches of the galaxy. But a Persian caliphate stowaway sabotages the mission, hoping to destroy science that he believes violates Islam. The Star Child Compact blends tomorrow's science with human foibles, fears, beliefs, and political intrigue, speculating on how civilization might develop while traveling on a generational starship, and how modern humans might interact with remnants of that civilization. In Book 3, the Iapetus Federation, besieged Israelis on Earth make their way to Mars as the Federation expands throughout the solar system. While global jihad rages on Earth, putting millions to the sword, the Star Child Institute develops wormhole transportation. But will this new technology be ready in time to rescue all that is left of the United States, the beleaguered Lone Star Conservancy, and remnants of other cultures around the globe? From hand-to-hand combat in the oceans to battles on Earth's surface to struggles in interplanetary space, our heroes fight to survive and expand to the far reaches of the universe. Robert G. Williscroft is an adventurer, polar explorer, deep-sea diver, nuclear submariner, scientist, and best-selling, award-winning author. His stories portray the accurate science and precise engineering that appeals to hard science fiction buffs. But the Star Child trilogy is for everyone who loves an epic tale, a grand journey by men and women who loom larger than life as they work, play, and love. Make the Star Child trilogy your own with individual hardcover, softcover, audiobook, and all major ebook editions worldwide, or collect the entire set for one epic journey by Robert G. Williscroft, the Star Child trilogy.
All right, and as
Excellent
always,
series.
Remember, listeners, that these commercials you hear on here, this is the audio version of videos over on the Fresh Ink Group YouTube channel. So go over there and subscribe and hit the like button.
Now, Robert, we've had you on the show before, and we've talked about Robert A. Heinlein, who is probably my all-time favorite classic science fiction writer, the late Robert A. Heinlein. I've been wanting to ask you, what other science fiction writers have you admired over the years, and what directions do you see science fiction going in some of the newer stuff versus some of that old classic material?
Well, probably one of my favorites who followed Robert Heinlein was Crichton. And his novels are intriguing, scientific, and his English is flawless, and he was a wonder to read. Arthur Clarke, of course, is important in the list of modern science fiction authors. And there's a guy that I've come to know who writes excellent hard science fiction, and that's Alistair Mayer and his T-Space series. I've really come to enjoy those.
And I've yet to read any of Alistair's work other than just some brief samples, but he is the guest on next week's show, so we're looking forward to learning a lot more about that. I think one that you didn't mention that was one of my classic favorites all the way back to high school was Isaac Asimov, too. And Theodore Sturgeon, Philip K. Dick, some of those guys as well.
Yeah,
I don't disagree, but I put Crichton and Heinlein and Clarke well above them.
Okay.
That's the thing about writers. I mean, everybody's got their own favorites for various reasons. Now, like Stephen just mentioned, the old style versus now, what sort of difference do you see in the old style of science fiction versus what's out there right now?
Starting in the mid-'60s, mid to late 60s, hard science fiction began to shift from stories that involved physics and astronomy and astrophysics and engineering. It tended to move into the soft science areas an awful lot more, psychology, sociology, and so forth. And that kind of blended very easily with science fantasy, and I found myself really turned off by that. So I still am happy when I come across an author who, in today's world, still writes about physics and astronomy and astrophysics and so forth.
So you obviously keep several series going at the same time and do other writing as well. What is your writing style and method like? I mean, do you just work on one thing one day and then the next day shift gears to another thing, or you spend a little time on each thing each day? And are you a morning writer, evening writer? Do you like to write while you're watching TV? What kind of writer are you?
With the exception of writing while I'm watching TV, the answer would be yes.
All of the above.
But to be a little bit more specific, people often ask, do you outline or do you write by the seat of your pants? And I outline. I get an idea. I lay out where I think it's going to go. I develop my characters. I create the characters that will be playing roles, and I define them. I define who they are, what they like, what they don't like, things that may never show up in the story, but define their characters so that they are fully rounded human beings. Occasionally, and this happened just last week when I was out running, I try to run every day, and I was out running, and a couple of my characters ganged up on me in my head and explained to me that they didn't like the direction that I was taking them, and they wanted to go in a different direction, and they bugged me until I got back and sat down at my computer and took notes to define where they were going, and then I spent the next 2 days revising what I had written about them to make them comply with what they wanted.
Now, we just heard the commercial for Star Child Trilogy. And in the commercial, it said, a couple of lines about each of the books: Slingshot, the Star Child Compact, and the Iapetus, how would you pronounce that, Federation?
Iapetus,
because I've heard it said both ways before, but I always thought Iapetus was correct. And obviously, Slingshot is very technical in terms of having, you thought through exactly how would the physics and engineering work for launching vehicles into low Earth orbit. And then that led to another series, the Daedalus Files. Can you talk a little bit about Slingshot and what direction you went with that story?
Sure. As you mentioned in the intro, I spent a year at the geographic South Pole. While I was down there, I was in charge of National Science Foundation atmospheric research projects. And because I knew I would have time on my hands, there were 17 of us who were isolated for 9 months without contact with the outside world except for an occasional ham radio contact. Anyway, I took several scientific papers with me down to the South Pole, and one of them was written by a guy named Keith Lofstrom. It was about a machine that could be built with today's technology and today's computer capabilities back then in the 80s that would allow for the transportation of humans and cargo into space without using rockets. I was absolutely fascinated by the concept, and when I came back to the United States, I looked up Keith, and we spent several days together going over the concepts, doing some of the math, and working out the detailed engineering for actually constructing a space launch loop between Baker and Jarvis Islands on the equatorial Pacific. Baker Island is just a few miles south of Howland Island, where Amelia Earhart was lost. She was on her way to land at Howland to refuel, and she never made it. So that laid it out, and I ended up putting the novel together, building the people and the machine. The machine plays a major role. People, of course, always are preeminent in any kind of good novel. But in this case, the people are building a machine that is itself a huge co-player in this plot. The book was actually launched at the International Space Elevator Conference in Seattle. And all of the world's space elevator scientists were present. They all now have copies of Slingshot on their desk, which is kind of cool. Space elevator is something that we cannot yet do with today's technology. A space launch loop is something that can be done and that is possible, and so they have great interest in the whole concept of a space launch loop, and it was an awful lot of fun to launch the book there. So that's the story of how Slingshot came to be.
Interesting.
Yeah, a lot of those concepts that like space elevators, I've been reading about those probably all the way back to the 60s as well. In terms of a concept, but in the United States in particular, it's been a lot of fits and starts as to whether or not the technology is even being explored, funded, developed, tested, and actually put into use. We're obviously seeing a huge shift now with private sector and rich people like Branson and Bezos and Elon Musk spending a lot of money trying to develop their own technology for getting into space as well. So I'm kind of encouraged by that as well, and maybe we start seeing some serious development about space elevators, slingshot, and other similar kinds of technology as alternative ways to launch into space. It's become clear that we need to keep putting things up into space, even if it's just satellites, communications, things like that as well.
Or that new Amazon warehouse on the moon.
Yeah.
Well, Keith Lofton wrote the foreword to Slingshot, and in the foreword he talks about what will bring about the construction of the Space Launch Loop. And he explained what the cost is for moving things into orbit now using rockets. And as we begin to increase the amount of mass that we're moving into orbit, the cost, of course, gets higher and higher and higher. Building a space launch loop is very expensive. It's a huge infrastructure to get it done. But there comes a point where the cost of building a space launch loop crosses the curve for using rockets to move matter into space. Because once a space launch loop is built, the cost for moving a ton of material into orbit or to the moon or to Mars is about the same as moving that ton of material on a train from Los Angeles to San Francisco.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really predicted to make a big difference too is when we get to that point and get past that tipping, is being able to start doing things like mining asteroids or other planets and being able to start using the resources beyond this planet, which is eventually, if not now, becoming an issue with rare earth materials and whatnot as well. So a lot of exciting possibilities.
Right. All right, we do have a phone caller, so we're going to take the call right now. Hello, caller. Welcome to the show. You're on the air. Your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm Kylan Darty, and I'm calling from Rock Island, Illinois.
Welcome to the show. Do you have a question or a comment for Dr. Williscroft?
I actually have both.
Okay.
I would like to say that I did just pre-order Operation Arctic Sting. I have been checking Amazon just about every day, waiting for it to go up.
Yeah, you and me both.
As you mentioned doing so earlier, I do want to say that I did leave very positive reviews for both Ivy Bells and Icebreaker, and I loved those books. I have the books, I have the audio books. I've listened and read them many times, and as a matter of fact, the copy of the Icebreaker audiobook I have was a review copy that I got from Dr. Williscroft. I emailed him and had been trading emails with him for a while about it. My question, it's kind of a weird question, I think, but I'm curious. When you left the submarine service and then returned to serve on subs, or even just anybody who knew you were a submariner, did you ever get the sense that you were kind of looked down on, or maybe thought of as like betraying the silent service because you left it even though you continued to serve on subs in a different capacity?
Well, that is an interesting question, and let me give you a little bit of background here. I started off as an enlisted sonar tech, and I was selected for a commissioning program called the Navy Enlisted Scientific Education Program. The Navy paid for my education, and I went back into submarines as a commissioned officer. My intent was to go to nuclear power school and get in line to become commanding officer of a nuclear sub. The Navy developed a new program that they were pushing those of us who went through this program into, called the Navy Weapons Officer Program. It didn't lead to command of a sub. Instead, it led to command of a missile facility somewhere on the planet. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be a submariner in command of a submarine, or I wanted to do something else. And so I asked to get out of submarines, was told you can't unless you volunteer for Vietnam. So I did that, and I ended up leaving subs, went to Defense Language Institute and learned Vietnamese in order to become a spook in country, and then the war stopped. And a series of circumstances moved me into the Man in the Sea program, and that's where everything else started to happen.
Well, that's quite the career change.
Have you read any of Dr. Williscroft's other books besides the Mac McDowell Mission series?
I have the full Daedalus set, and I haven't gotten to reading them yet. I just completed a year of college, so I've been kind of busy with that. I have those, and I think I have the first and second Star Child books, and I'm very much looking forward to reading all of them.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you for.
There's a gap of time between Slingshot and the Star Child Compact, but the Iapetus Federation follows directly on the Star Child Compact. They are sequential completely. They stand on their own, but one follows the other closely.
All right.
Interesting.
Hey, it's a real pleasure speaking with you. We have exchanged emails for a while. Nice to talk with you.
Yeah, thanks for calling in.
It's great to speak with you as well. And I don't mind telling you, I have been bragging to my friends that I have been speaking to one of my favorite authors in email.
Thank you very much. You know how to make a guy feel good.
Yeah, definitely. And all you other authors out there, pay attention to that because, decades ago, generations ago, authors were something far away. You never really interacted with them unless they came to your town for a book signing or something. But now, your fans expect some kind of interaction. They want to connect with you on social media, follow you, maybe even have an opportunity to share a comment with you or post a review about your book on their favorite retailers. So it's sometimes we get new authors who've never published before, and they don't really seem to quite understand why they need to be building that social media footprint and getting out there and interacting with the fans. It's because that's what they expect now, and that's how you get your word out there.
Yeah, that's especially the social media, which, as you just mentioned, Stephen. One of our authors asked me that question: why do I need Twitter? I mean, it seems like a waste of time. Because you can reach out to your readers. This is how you get readers. And then after they read the book, if they want to ask you questions, they can ask you through Twitter.
Yes. So you want to play another commercial?
Tyler, is that? Did you have any more questions or comments?
No, that is everything I had other than to say to everyone listening, check out the Mac McDowell books if you haven't already. They're great.
All right. Well, thanks for calling in and giving that thumbs up.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Okay, so
this is the Daedalus files.
All right.
In Daedalus, Navy SEAL Derek Tiger Bailey, irreverent member of the SEAL's Winged Insertion Command, makes a harrowing first base jump in the experimental Griffin 7 hard-shell wingsuit from the edge of space. He test flies the armor-plated Griffin 10 in Daedalus LEO, catapulting into space by slingshot and dropping from a record-obliterating 160 clicks. Testing the enhanced Griffin 10 MK4 in Daedalus Squad, Bailey's six-man team believes it is fully prepared for hurtling around the world and staging critical re-entry, but challenged to innovate life-or-death solutions with only seconds to spare. It might not survive intact. Then the presidential frontrunner is seized by pirates for ransom in Daedalus Combat, and the SWIC team is called to action where it must literally improvise on the fly with everything to lose. Join Tiger Bailey through all four adventures in Sci-Fi Master Robert G. Williscroft's Daedalus series, now collected for the first time as the Daedalus Files, SEAL's Winged Insertion Command, SWIC.
All right. Now, we do have a couple of comments on Twitter. We'll get to those before they grow stale. Verwayne Greenhow, he said, all right, Lisa and I are in the house. By the way, I got the book that I won in the mail a few days back. I love it. Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome, Verwayne. Thanks.
And he also said, I picked up several of Robert Williscroft's books. I haven't had time to get into them deep yet, but I will soon. All right, cool. And we do have another caller. It's the same area code. I'm not sure if it's the same, if it's Tyler again, but it looks like it's the same area code. You want to take that call?
Sure.
Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Ellen Steele, and I'm calling from Denver. And
Hi.
I had a couple of questions and comments about the Mac McDowell series.
Ooh.
Okay. Go ahead.
So I really appreciate the glossaries that you stick in the back, because I don't know that much about the Navy. In spite of being a military brat, I'm an Air Force brat, so I'm not that familiar with the Navy. So I really appreciate the glossaries, because it makes it much easier for me to enjoy the books. In Ivy Bells and Icebreaker, Mac McDowell wins a few awards, and I was wondering if, in your experiences, Dr. Williscroft, if you have received anything, especially for your participation, the work that you did with Operation Ivy Bells. I mean, you've mentioned in the book the Navy Cross and the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart and the National Security Medal, and I'm sure you haven't gotten all those, but I was curious if you got any of those.
That's an interesting question. The people who received those awards received them under a cloak of secrecy. The award citations are so generic that if you were to read them without any linkage to what went on, you wouldn't have a clue what happened. So the awards that I received with my participation were not personal awards. They were part of the unit awards that were given to the entire group. And to this day, some of those awards and the designations and the people who receive them are still classified.
That's intriguing. Yeah.
Okay. Kate shows up. Well, has a love in Icebreaker, whose name is Kate, and I was wondering if she was going to be in the next one.
Kate plays a major role in Arctic Sting. In fact, it starts out with a bang, you might say, and goes on from there. And Kate appears throughout the novel. In fact, she writes a journal, and the end of each section is a chapter out of her journal as she describes what she did and what happened to her during the same period that Mac is describing what happened to them as they were going through the ice pack.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading that. Okay, one more question. Are you going to be at Mile High Con? Because I'd like to be able to bring a couple of books for you to autograph.
I will be there, very much so, yes. I think right now that I will be occupying a table with Alistair Mayer, who you guys just said earlier is going to be on next week. So we're planning on sharing a table because we seem to be the only two really hard science fiction authors at the convention.
Cool. And when is Mile High?
It's I believe it's in October. I don't have the date in front of me, but be sure and ask Al that when you have him on next week, and he'll have it in front of him.
Okay, and keep us posted, too, so we can put it in the newsletter for listeners. Anybody who's anywhere near the Denver area, I would definitely want to attend something like that. Not just a good chance to meet you and Alistair, but it's a great convention anyway.
It's been going on for decades. It's really great, yeah.
All right.
So
thank you. I look forward to seeing you and Alistair at Mile High Con.
Well, thank you very much, Ellen.
Yeah, thanks for calling in.
Thanks for calling.
Bye.
Now, we just heard the commercial for the Daedalus Files. Robert, can you tell us about the promotion that you're doing right now with the Daedalus series?
Yeah. Daedalus Files started off with one story, Daedalus. I had read an article about an actual hard-shell wingsuit that was being developed by a consortium in Germany, and I thought, man, this is really cool. And the more thought I gave to it, the more I realized that this is something that the SEALs could pick up and really do something with. And so Daedalus was born. It wasn't enough for a novel, but it was enough for a long short story or a novelette. And then the three succeeding stories just kind of fell in place. And then, as you guys know, we pulled them all together into a single volume called The Daedalus Files. And it occurred to me, perhaps with a little bit of help from the fine folks at Fresh Ink Group, that if I were to offer the first book, which is out there as an ebook, as an audio book, as a hardbound book, and as a softbound book, if I were to offer the ebook for free with an appropriate link at the back of the book, it might lead people into reading the whole series. And so I believe I heard you guys say just before we went on the air that Daedalus has finally showed up as a freebie on Amazon today.
It did, yes. It's also out there as a freebie at places like Barnes & Noble and elsewhere, too. The last time I looked, we've got more than 200 retailers for non-Kindle versions of the books, and obviously I can't check all of them, but it is populating and it is showing up free every place that I have looked. So listeners, get out there and get your free copy of the first novella in that series, and then make sure you pick up the rest of the series at the same time.
Yeah, who doesn't like free?
I love it.
So speaking of the wingsuit, Robert, what's the real world status of that right now in the research and development and all that?
The most recent thing I saw was about a month and a half ago, where the Air Force and their equivalent to the Navy SEALs, I frankly forget what they call them, but these are guys that are tough, go-get-em fellas in the same sense that the SEALs are, or the Army Rangers. Anyway, they're flying them. They're testing them out. They're taking them up to 20,000 feet, and they're flying them out of the aircraft now.
Wow, that's crazy. 20,000 feet.
I'd like to think maybe that they used the Daedalus files for guidance.
And I bet they have. But every time I go look at YouTube now looking for wingsuits or similar kinds of devices, it seems there's always a couple of new videos on there where people are experimenting. So it's really starting to happen.
Yeah.
Now, we mentioned earlier that we're encouraging people to get out there and leave reviews. A new review popped up for the Daedalus Files on Amazon a couple of days ago by Kenneth A. Ween. And he mentions that he says, Williscroft unapologetically writes of the masculine imperative to take part in events, to take effective action against threat, and yes, to push oneself even into danger in pursuit of that adrenaline-fueled well-being that is the true man. Now, that's an interesting take, and I see a lot more other than just, the masculine aspects of it, but this is a reader who found a good way to see what it meant to him and how he interpreted the stories, and then he put that in his review. And that's a good way to try to get the attention of other people who like those kinds of stories as well. So, again, get over there, post those reviews, and look at the other reviews people have posted as well. Now, Robert, do you know who Kenneth A. Ween is?
Yeah, Kenneth, I don't know him personally, but Kenneth runs several Facebook groups that deal with writers and reader appreciation of writers. And it looks to me like Kenneth is practicing what he preaches.
Good for him. Yeah.
All right. We have another caller on here, so you guys want to take another call?
Let's go.
All right. Come on. There we go. Hello, caller. You're on the air. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Alistair. I'm calling from Colorado.
Hi, Alistair.
Mr. Mayor.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks. And I look forward to being on next week. I just wanted to give, first, a couple of comments. I wanted to thank Robert for the shout-out for my stuff. But I'm also going to say that because I get a sneak preview of Robert's work, I'm one of his first readers, I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed Arctic Sting. It's a great follow-on to the other two Mac McDowell stories, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I keep prodding him, as to when's the next one coming out. But I realize that's not going to be for a while.
Well, I appreciate the comments, Al, and for the segue into what will be the fourth Mac McDowell mission, I can briefly describe that Mac and his team find themselves on the Tethys headed to the Antarctic waters, and they will be putting themselves in opposition to bad guys out of the 1960s and 70s, mostly North Koreans and Communist Chinese, and they will be helping the Taiwanese out. This was back when Taiwan was really struggling to find its own identity, so there's going to be a lot of politics and a lot of international intrigue and a whole bunch of underwater action.
Still surprisingly relevant.
Yeah.
I look forward to that.
Okay. Any other questions, Alistair?
No, that was it. I'll like I say, I look forward to talking more next week. Thank you.
Yeah, and we look forward to having you next week. Thanks for calling.
You bet.
All right, that's next week's guest. So.
Let's move on to the Orc Chronicles. Yeah, let's move on to the Orc Chronicles series and start with the commercial for the first book in the series, Icicle.
Now, introducing Book 1 in the new series by master sci-fi storyteller Robert G. Williscroft, Icicle, a tensor matrix, the first Urt Chronicle. Dying of prostate cancer, wealthy entrepreneur Braxton Thorpe is frozen in hopes of someday being revived and cured. That's when he discovers a threat to the entire solar system. But he has a problem. He's dead. He awakens to find himself uploaded into an electronic matrix. Exploring beyond the matrix and the larger global net, he discovers the Urt, a distributed electronic entity older than humanity, with an unnerving secret. Aliens wiped out nearly all life on Earth once, and they are coming back to do it again. The mathematical entity that is Thorpe has to find a way to convince humans of this threat, and in time to do something about it. But how? And what? Will Thorpe's carefully assembled team have any shot at saving the world? Will the Russians and Chinese help or betray? And who uploaded the cat? Icicle, a tensor matrix, the first Urt Chronicle, is available worldwide in hardcover, softcover, all ebook formats, and now as an audiobook narrated by Trenton Bennett, including music and sound effects. Icicle, a tensor matrix, is proudly published by Fresh Ink Group.
And that was Bennett narrating the commercial as well.
Yeah, that was a fun audiobook to put together. That was a blast working on that one. All those cool little sound effects and just really cool.
So, Robert, what's going on with the second book in the series? And I understand you're finding doing the research very interesting.
That's a fact. I'm about halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through the second Urt Chronicle, and a significant part of the story takes place on Mars, and in particular involves the terraforming of Mars to make Mars livable for human beings. And I did a lot of research to figure out how one might go about doing this. I have the advantage, of course, of having available to my people some technology and some methodology that isn't currently available, but that we can project from current science engineering. And anyway, I realized that I would have to dig trenches on the surface of Mars from the elevated South Pole northward to a couple of basins, and in general to distribute meltwater from the South Pole. And I started off by coming up with a good analog for what the regolith on Mars is actually consists of, and it turns out that its vapor point is very close to that of iron. And that being the case, I did some calculation to see what would it take to vaporize a 20-meter wide, 20-meter deep, 3-meter thick chunk of regolith. And it turns out that it takes 8,000 gigajoules of concentrated energy to do this. A gigajoule basically is a gigawatt per second, so that you end up in 3 seconds. In 1 second, you actually end up cutting a meter of this stuff out and vaporizing it. And I had to figure out those numbers, and then I had to research, well, how can I get 8,000 megajoules? That's an awful lot of power. The terraforming system that I've developed for the novel includes a ring of solar mirrors in polar orbit around Mars. And I worked backward and determined that I would have to have mirrors that are 4 kilometers on a side, and it would take 1,000 of those mirrors focusing their beams to one point on Mars to come up with the 8,000 gigajoules to do this. But it was doable. The amount of solar energy was there, and all it takes is the technology to put the mirrors in polar orbit in the first place, and the computer capabilities to maneuver them and manipulate them in such a way that they can focus their energy together to do this. So that anybody who reads the novel and sits down and says, well, I'm going to see if this guy really did his homework, they'll find out I did.
Yeah. Probably a lot of readers aren't going to be able to calculate that, but, man, that's a lot of work going into that. A lot of research.
Yeah, I especially like characters.
One of the other problems that Mars has, Mars doesn't have a magnetic field. And as a result of that, the solar wind, as it flows past Mars, rips the atmosphere off of Mars. Mars would have a thick atmosphere if it weren't for the fact that it doesn't have a magnetic field. So my guys had to create a magnetic field around Mars. And the way they did that was to put a superconducting wire at a geocentric orbit around the equator of Mars. Now, this sounds like a big deal, and it is a big deal, but it is doable with appropriate technology, and that creates a dipole, and the solar wind gets deflected around Mars, and the atmosphere then remains, and the digging of the trenches produces vapor, which in turn fills the atmosphere with all kinds of stuff, and then they have to remove the contaminants that they don't want and modify the ones that they do want so that and you end up with the appropriate balances of nitrogen and oxygen and bits of other stuff like carbon dioxide.
So you think something like that really is doable?
Oh yeah. It's just a question of whether we want to do it. We can do it. We could do it now if we focused on it. We have the technology where we could actually do that now. It would be horribly expensive. It's not something that would be done overnight, but it could be done over a period of 2 or 3 decades if we approached it right.
And like a lot of these things now, it's coming down to if people can find a way to make some money from it, that's what's going to drive that investment up front, and then we're going to start to see some big changes in technology. I'm real excited about it. I'm kind of wishing I'd been born maybe a generation or 2 later so I could be around to see some of it, but hey, science fiction's all about thinking ahead, isn't it?
Yeah. So you look at everything that kind of came out of just Star Trek from 50 years ago. There's these flip phones that's basically a communicator.
Yeah.
Something that a lot of people don't know about that, the warp drive that the Enterprise uses is actually a version of an Alcubierre warp drive. A Mexican physicist came up with the concept of a warp drive called the Alcubierre drive. And Al, in his books, uses a future version of that drive for his people to get to travel interstellar distances in normal times instead of long extended times. So that too was first predicted in Star Trek.
Yeah, cool.
Well, now the latest book is Operation Arctic Sting. We've talked about it a little bit. We've made a new commercial for it. There's a new video over on YouTube that talks about all three of the Mac McDowell mission books, and we've got a roll in right now with the audio portion of that. So let's go ahead and start checking out the Mac McDowell mission series. Beem?
Now, from Fresh Ink Group and best-selling author Robert G. Williscroft, the Mac McDowell Mission Series. With a security clearance above top secret, Saturation Dive Team Officer in Charge Mac McDowell leads his team into critical Cold War counter-Soviet missions. Watch Mac prove what brave men can achieve under real pressure, the kind that will steal your air and crush the life out of you. In Operation Ivy Bells, it's the summer of 1972 when Mac and his off-the-books deep-water espionage group are conducting a daring undersea wiretapping operation to gather Russian intel and avert World War. Join nuclear submariner Mac McDowell for extreme diving, a battle with giant squid, and more as he risks everything in the most dangerous operation yet. In Operation Icebreaker, Mac McDowell is leading his submarine team for a mission to lay SOSUS arrays under the Arctic ice when they clash with a highly automated Alpha-class Soviet submarine. Overwhelmed by mechanical problems, the Soviet crew abandons their sub near Point Barrow, Alaska. The skipper launches DSR-V-1 Mystic so Mac and his crew can board the empty sub and gather intelligence. The arrival of an even more advanced Soviet sub leads to breathtaking underwater clashes, with the specter of war looming. Will Mac and his crew be sunk by the Soviets, or will they safely return to Alaska, where Mac's new love, Kate, anxiously waits? In Operation Arctic Sting, Mac McDowell and his team capture the abandoned Soviet sub. Piloting their prize through the ice pack to the U.S. East Coast, they must evade or confront other Soviet subs trying to recover the ship or sink it. Breathtaking deep-sea clashes erupt, including hand-to-hand combat with Soviet Morskoy Spetsnaz divers under the ice. Too far from Toothus to escape, the Americans are accosted by a 5-ton orca. Will Mac's ship survive long enough to reach friendly waters, or will the men become just another meal for a deadly whale? The McDowell Mission series by Robert G. Williscroft is available worldwide in jacketed hardcovers, paperbacks, ebooks from Kindle to Nook and Kobo and more, plus exclusive audiobook editions with music and sound effects. The Mac McDowell Mission series is proudly published by Fresh Ink Group. Take a breath and dive in for thrilling submarine adventures in every Mac McDowell mission.
And again, that was Trenton Bennett doing the voiceover, and he's the one who did all three of the audio books for the Mac McDowell Mission series, with the third one still being in the editing phase right now, not yet ready for release.
And again, the video book trailers for this, go to Fresh Ink Group on YouTube, and again, subscribe while you're there and hit the like buttons. These are cool videos. I mean, they're a lot of fun to put together, and we try to get as creative and tie it into the story, to kind of put the would-be reader in that kind of environment, so you get the gist of what the stories are about.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by marine life. In fact, Fresh Ink Group's logo is an octopus. When we were putting together the cover for this, Robert, you had us take a bite out of the dorsal fin on the orca. It was referred to in the commercial. What's the deal with the bite out of the fin? And this orca, he becomes kind of a character in the story. I mean, is this realistic? Is this just fiction, or should we be believing this?
Well, let's approach the last part of that question first. I've spent a fair amount of time in the water with orcas. Not one orca, but several orcas. They never threatened me. They were never threatening to me. And in fact, I was able to set up a relationship and even bond with a couple of them. They're marvelous creatures. They're way smarter than dogs. And the antics that I portray in Operation Arctic Sting are accurate and realistic. As to the bite out of the dorsal fin, one of the characteristics of orcas is that they're really kind of hard to tell one from another. And since it was important that Borisco, the name given to the orca by Sergei, who is a captured Ukrainian diver from Operation Ivy Bells, who plays a role in all of the books, Borisco plays a role in working with the divers and in one case even protecting them. And to make him identifiable, it turned out that before the story happened, before we met Borisco, he had a confrontation with a large shark, and the shark managed to get a piece out of his dorsal fin before Borisco ate the shark.
All right. So that was Trenton Bennett again that we just heard, and he did the audiobook narration, which we're putting together right now with the sound effects and the music. One of the things that you like about Trenton is the way he does the voices of your characters. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Trenton sets himself up a list of all of the characters and will sometimes call me up and ask for information, background information on characters so that he can understand how they might sound. And then he sets up a sound file for each of his characters, and as the characters speak within the story, Trenton maintains the string. They speak the same way. They have the same voice. They have the same intonation. Trenton speaks Russian. His Russian accent is excellent, and it's absolutely great to work with him because he goes out of his way to make the sounds appear to the reader the way they appeared in my head as the writer.
Yeah, and listeners, we had him on the show here a few weeks ago. If you missed that, get in the archives and look for the Trenton Bennett episode. Very interesting, especially if you're a writer and you're interested in the audiobooks for your own books. Even if you don't need him as your voiceover guy, he gives a lot of great info on getting the ball rolling on that.
Let me add one other interesting thing. Trenton told me at one point that he had to wait until the afternoon to do a correction that I wanted him to make to a voice, because he said that in the morning his own voice sounds different than it does later on in the day, and that character had been recorded later on in the day all the time, and so he wanted to make sure that the voice was consistent.
Well, that speaks to the meticulous detail and the pride he takes in putting out a quality product, and we definitely appreciate that.
Yeah. We have one more comment here on Twitter from Verwayne Greenhow. This is going back to something we were talking about earlier, and he just said, sounds like a physics course I took a few decades back. So
let me add that I don't dump this stuff on the reader. It is presented in little bites that just help the reader to comprehend the overall nature of what's going on. Don't need a physics degree to understand it or enjoy it.
No, I don't. Because, we're doing the audiobooks on so many of these, and they are compelling stories, and they're easy to follow. You learn some stuff. So, you don't need a degree. I don't have a physics degree. I'm not a huge sci-fi fan, but, man, I love these stories.
And for you writers who aren't familiar with the word verisimilitude, that's having all of the parts and pieces and elements in your story in such a way that they are believable, even if you make them all up, but so that they're plausible for readers and that they can suspend disbelief and go for that ride with you. And that's why Dr. Williscroft's research and taking the time to think these things through and make sure that they're plausible for the people who pay attention to the scientific aspects yet also can be presented to lay people who don't necessarily know much about the science, but so that they can understand the basics and see that this really does make sense. And that makes what happens with the characters, all of it, it's verisimilitude, and that's an important aspect and something we appreciate about Robert G. Williscroft stories very much. And the same holds true for the sound effects that we're putting in these audio books. we do have some fun with those.
We do. Now, Robert, explain the differences between like the 1MC and the Squawk Box and, you know, the Gertrude. I mean, we get these little notes and we've got to do little different things to the voices in there.
Well, on a submarine, when you are doing an announcement to the entire sub, you use an announcing system called the 1MC. And what you guys did was to develop a sound characteristic for Trenton's reading of the announcements on the 1MC so that it was recognizable to the listener as, oh, that's a 1MC transmission. The Squawk Box is a box that is used up on the open bridge of the submarine and is used to communicate down to the control room of the submarine. And so it has a much narrower bandwidth, and it sounds a little bit more tinny, and it doesn't have the overall quality of the 1MC transmission, and you guys managed to make that one work just as well. And then the submarines in the second and third books, in Icebreaker and Arctic Sting, communicate with one another when they are nearby using something called a secure Gertrude. The Gertrude underwater telephone was a method of heterodyning of just like standard radio, except it uses sound waves instead of electromagnetic waves through the water, and you can hear it. It's very loud, detectable, and it's like a great big arrow pointing at whoever is doing the transmitting on a Gertrude. A secure Gertrude uses something called CDMA. It takes the signal and splits it up into little bunches, distributes it across the entire spectrum, and sends it out in the water so that it sounds like a faint hiss, just like background noise. And if you have the right receiving equipment, you can put it all back together, and what you hear at the receiving end is virtually as if the person were talking to you, just a slight echoing effect because it has been transmitted through the water. And you guys managed to make that happen just as well. And those three effects appear over and over and over again in the two books, and you've done great with them.
Well, we appreciate that. There's also lots of other sound effects: breaking ice, underwater shots, explosions, and of course all the animals. We have to keep it straight. Wait a minute, is that the narwhals arguing with each other, or are these the orcas talking, or what's going on there too? So it's real atmospheric, and we really appreciate that. I will probably never be in a submarine for the rest of my life, but sometimes it sure feels like I'm in one, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean,
now,
even the creaking noise, when the subs dive down, you get a creaking sound. We've got it.
Yep. Now, Robert.
Yeah, that happens because the whole hull is compressing, and when you compress a metal hull, it tends to creak and crack.
Yeah, I bet that's unnerving the first time you hear it. So, Robert, the third book is out now, more or less. It's kind of half published. It should be appearing in the coming days in various places. And your intention was to have a promotion with that. And since I had to publish this without Lauren's help this past week, all the places that used to say minimum price 99 cents now say $1.99. So we were hoping to offer that first book for 99. Right now, if you order a Kindle edition, it says $1.99. But as soon as Lauren gets back from vacation, we're going to see if she can find a way to get that down. Either way, it's still a very inexpensive introductory price. And how long will that be for Robert?
We'll be keeping that price until we publish the book on August the 4th, and then the price will jump up to its normal price, which I believe is $6.85, right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. So at least no more than $1.99, and we're hoping that if you go ahead and place your order at that, when you actually get the book, it will by then only be $99. But either way, $1.99 is still quite a good deal and a good way to get your feet wet, pun intended, in discovering the Mac McDowell Mission series.
Yeah. All right. Well,
it's been fun revisiting these again, and as you can see, we're almost out of time here. Robert, do you have anything you'd like to say to encourage people to tune in next week and check out Alistair Mayer and his books?
Yeah, let me give you just a brief overview of the universe that he's created. Picture the Earth like it is now, but in the future, you've got Europe, you've got the Americas, you've got the Asian groups, you even got the Russian groups, and we've got this method for traveling between the stars, and the problem is that we've got the method for doing it, we the Americans, but we don't have power supplies small enough to fit inside the warp bubble. Turns out the Chinese, they didn't have the warp drive, but they had power supplies small enough to fit inside the bubble, so there had to be a marriage. And that's how he starts it off. And when the first expedition gets to Alpha Centauri and they get to one of the planets in Alpha Centauri, what they discover is that this planet has been terraformed about 60 million years ago, terraformed to Earth standards. Nobody knows by whom, how, what, and as we expand out, as his stories expand out in a sphere about our sun, they keep running into planets that have been terraformed. And that's where the T-space comes into play, terraformed space, T-space. His series is split into two separate groups of novels. One is the exploration and the discovery of these and all that's involved with that, the politics and the discovery and the settlement and the pioneering and so forth. And then the second series takes place about 50 years later when there's an awful lot that's already settled, and a female jet jockey, a female starship jockey, and a male archaeologist work together to try and solve this mystery of the who did it? Who did this terraforming 60 million years ago?
Wow!
And so the stories fit together, but they form two separate groups. And Al can give you much more detail. But it's a fascinating concept. I've never seen it before, and Al executes it beautifully.
Wow, that's definitely a ringing endorsement.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting show next week, so everybody's going to want to tune in for that one, especially if you're a sci-fi fan.
Definitely. Well, Robert, we appreciate having you on again, and we appreciate you being so prolific, keeping new stories out there for us and for your readers and for your audiobook listeners as well, and for keeping Trent and Bennett busy as well. So we're looking forward to having you back to talk about the next Orc Chronicle book. Probably will be your next one, I assume.
Yeah, give it a couple months, it'll be done.
All right. Great. Now, listeners, remember, if you've missed any of these shows, we archive them in multiple places, including on all of our websites and in our YouTube channel, Fresh Ink Group. So get over there and check those out.
And if you're not subscribed to our newsletter, get over to the freshinkgroup.com website. And on the homepage, scroll down to the bottom, and there's a newsletter sign up on the homepage. And sign up. This newsletter it's a quick read. It's not going to bog you down for a whole afternoon. And it gives you the link for each of these shows each week. And also it shares new releases. There's some short stories in there. There's information on authors and their books and just all kinds of cool stuff. So get over there and sign up for that and be in the know.
And remember, next week on the 14th, we're going to have science fiction author Alistair Mayer. And then who's next after that, Beem?
C.S. Boyack is going to pay us a visit on the 21st.
And what kind of writing does he do?
I'm drawing a blank. Kind of like fantasy writing,
Yeah.
and there's something else to it too, but it's a lot of fantasy writing. So
yeah. And then after that, on the 28th, we're going to have Country Music Hall of Fame drummer, played with Alabama for 28 years, Mark Herndon, and his wife, country singer Leah Seawright. And if you're not familiar with either or both of those, they're all over YouTube. Definitely check out Leah Seawright, Leah Wright, Wright. One of my favorites is her video Country Girl 101. But that's the Herndons on the 28th. And then after that,
on August 4th, we've got Karen Ingalls and Carol Tucker. Now, Stephen talked about Karen Ingalls earlier. They'll be promoting the autism book. What's the title of that book again, Stephen?
It's called Learning About Autism, and then it has lengthy subtitles that are full of keywords, because that's what we do now.
Okay. So they'll be in here on August 4th, and this is an educational episode here. You'll learn a lot about autism, and many listeners may know somebody they may be personally touched by, somebody with autism or some other disability.
And then after that, on August 11th, we have Susan Hughes. She operates My Independent Editor. She's a freelance editor who has edited the books of several Fresh Ink Group authors over the years, and we always admire and respect Susan's work. So we're going to ask her about what it's like to be editing people's books and work with authors, and what kinds of challenges she faces, and see what kind of advice that she can offer. Susan Hughes also has recently joined GeezeWriter, so if you go to GeezeWriter.com, you'll see that she's starting to add things to her pages in there with helpful advice for writers who want to learn how to edit their own books or find the best editor to help work on their books. So that's a pretty full roster that we got coming up, Beem.
Yes, it's stacked with lots of talent. So don't miss any of them, and if you do, we got an archive full of them. So listen, everybody, thank you for tuning in tonight, and thank you again, Robert, for taking time out on your Wednesday to stop by and chat with us.
Yes, thanks, Robert, and thanks to all the callers.
You're very welcome.
And thanks, Verwayne and Lisa, as always, being in the audience. These are two loyal listeners, and we are very appreciative.
Yep. Okay, we'll see everybody.
Yeah, we'll talk to everybody again next week. Take care, everybody.
See you then.
Goodbye.
You've been a part of Voice of Indy, a production of Fresh Ink Group. Spread the word, support our guests, then find us at freshinkgroup.com and be sure to hashtag Fresh Ink Group.